Hey, coaches. So today we're going to be taking a look at another set of category of questions as we look at the distinction between staying questions versus moving questions or connecting questions. Let's start with a little bit of an analogy, as I'm prone to do. In coaching, one way to look at a really solid coaching exploration, it's similar to something like a waltz. Speaking as someone who's never danced before, I'm only assuming that the feeling of a waltz is a bit of like an energetic up, then down, up, down, up, down. And in coaching, much of the flow of a great session will have that sense of progression. And the up words, like tension and energy, is going to be led oftentimes by great exploration around what the ideal would be, what is in the way, and what matters most as we're moving towards that thing and connecting a lot of dots around what this person wants to achieve. And through that deep exploration of who they are, their needs, their wants, their thoughts, their values, and how all of those things are interconnected with this big agenda that they're working on with today's topic, there often comes a shift, a moment where there's a climax, there's a point at which it is best for the coach to drop, to stay, to help the coaching experience capitalize on what has come up in the session and to begin leveraging that new learning, that new awareness towards the action, towards the plan, towards a decision, or at least towards a new direction of the coaching session. So again, the distinction is moving or connecting questions versus staying questions, as opposed to many of the previous distinctions that we've made. There's truly, I shouldn't say truly, but there's very little distinction in terms of which is better than the other. It's more when are they most effective. But these are different categories that tend to come in the two different phases of a coaching exploration: the bringing up, the rising action, so to speak, and at the climax point, we switch to staying questions. There are two different kinds of staying questions, and one is less desirable in a coaching session. And this staying or settling question often comes up early in a coaching session where the coach is maybe looking for more details or wanting or challenging the client to maybe define things. But those questions don't tend to help the client grow. More, it's helping define the space. It's not necessarily a bad question, but the questions would look like this. What does that look like? The cliche coaching question, whereas therapists have to deal with the what does that feel like? Coaches have to, or how do you feel? How does that make you feel? The coaches have to deal with what does that look like? It's our cliche question, and in many ways, it isn't very effective when we are looking at what does that look like right now. When you say this is happening, what does that look like? Is going to just look at the present moment and not really moving towards anything. Another challenging one to watch out for as a coach is it sounds like a great question. It sounds close to a great question, but um, what could you essentially it's could you define this, or how would you define that word? It's it's very close to a powerful question because you're often leveraging the word that they said. How would you define fear? How would you define hope? How would you define whatever word that they've said? But it does tend to just stay. And if we're at the early part of an exploration, we're not really connecting that to anything more significant than a current definition, the current way things look. If we were going to look at the current way of things as a part of the moving phase, we can always tie that style of question towards how do you want the current way things look to be different in the future. So you see that the staying questions don't tend to be a good spot to start right after we set the agenda. Now, the other style of staying questions do come at that climax point, in my opinion, at the best part, where they can come in. It would be after a rise in action full of moving, connecting questions. We've got that great aha moment. And now let's stay here for a while and really define and understand and, yeah, see what it looks like to capitalize on what came out of the session. So, questions are going to be what are you learning right now? What is occurring to you? Making an observation of behavior. You were looking up in the air, you paused. What did you just see that relate, or like, what are you seeing right now that relates to what you want or what you are after, what you're wanting out of the session? So we are staying here in this moment, capitalizing on the learning. What does it look like? This agenda, this problem, this thing we're working on. What does this look like now that we've arrived at this place? Instead of looking to move past, continuing to go deep, we're just going to take a look at where we are in the process. Now, looking at the moving-oriented questions, these are going to be probably the more familiar. They're a mix of exploratory questions and capitalizing on the set agenda. They're often focused on building tension towards the ideal result that the client wants. As we look at that START model of agenda setting, the R, the measurable result that we're after out of the session, we want to help the client be exploring things that helps them reach towards that result. So we're going to ask about what obstacles are in the way. As you imagine yourself being there, what will it feel like? What do you imagine your legacy might be able to become? What impact will you have on others? What values are at stake? And so on. Now, another way of doing it, not just looking at the deep stuff, which we've seen with transformational exploratory questions, but connective questions are also moving questions. Connective questions are often associated with checking in. How does what you're saying here relate to the original agenda? How does what you're saying here relate to the overall goal that we set? But also, how does the way you're speaking right now relate to the way you were speaking at the beginning, or differ, or connect? This idea of connecting, and so connecting the dots, helping the client reflect on the differences and connections between different parts of their session or multiple sessions is very helpful to help this individual in the moment connect with their whole selves. And then finally, another moving style question that helps move things forward is after that climax point and staying and kind of observing where we are in the session, what learning is happening right now, then we can move past that again to a new space of application or next phase. So we move into questions like, what would you like to do from here? Where are we going next in this coaching session? Now that you've had this learning, what are you going to do with that learning? How does what action do you want to be taking that will capitalize on what you've taken away from here? How do you want to remember what you've come away with here in our coaching session when you step into the meeting with your manager, and so on? It's going to pick up all that learning and then carry it forward. So again, it's similar to the idea of a, I don't know, waltz, a dance, where up, down, up, down, up, down. And in many ways, it's just an up pause and then continuing the upward trajectory, building energy, building motivation, building awareness, and then every once in a while pausing to reflect on that awareness. Even after we've had an agenda setting, some great moving forward oriented questions, some lovely aha moment, a shift, then we have those staying questions to learn from that moment. We move forward with applying that learning into some sort of action. Even at that point, we'll stay after the action and planning to reflect on what are you taking away from the fact that you built this action plan so simply here today, or you were able to solve this problem you said was insurmountable at the beginning of the session. What are you learning about yourself? So again, build up that tension and that awareness with the moving forward questions, pause for learning, capitalize on that learning with another set of moving forward questions that either look at the next part of the agenda or action and planning. When you get that action planning in, move into another state of staying. What are we learning? Don't miss this moment of awareness.